Hello and welcome back to Rants from the Road. I am your host, Mr. Constitution. Today we'll be continuing the series we started yesterday with reading the Constitution, because as citizens it's important for us to know and understand what the Constitution says so that we can keep our government in check. Lord knows it needs it right now. So we'll be continuing today, starting off with reading the actual Constitution itself. Last time we started looking and read the preamble, the kind of introduction to the Constitution. Now we'll be starting on the actual Constitution proper with Article 1, Sections 1 and 2. So Article 1 deals with the legislature of our government, the legislative branch of our government. So let's get started. Section 1, Article 1, Section 1, all legislative powers herein granted shall be vested in a Congress of the United States, which shall consist of a Senate and House of Representatives. Section 1's pretty straightforward and simple. Here we establish and found two houses of Congress, the Senate and the House of Representatives. We'll get more details on what exactly the House and the Senate are supposed to be, but here we established the bicameral system of Congress that we have. Two houses of Congress, each with different responsibilities and different structures that will be the main governing body of the United States. Section 2. The House of Representatives shall be composed of members chosen every second year by the people of the several states, and the electors in each state shall have the qualifications requisite of electors of the most numerous branch of the state legislature. So, that's the first clause in Section 2. The House of Representatives shall be composed of members chosen every second year by the people of the several states. So, the people of each state will choose their representatives, and the electors in each state shall have the qualifications requisite for electors of the most numerous branch of the state legislature. Now that seems like a lot of word salad to us right now, doesn't it? So an elector is someone who elects. So a voter, the person who can cast a ballot, is an elector. So what it's saying here is that the people who can vote for the House of Representatives must meet the qualifications of those who can vote for the House, for the largest for the largest branch of the state legislatures. So all of the states, when the Constitution was written, had at least one governing body, one set of a house of the state legislatures. So what this is establishing is that if you can vote for your state legislature, you can vote for the members of the House of Representatives. So, next clause. No person shall be a representative who shall not have attained the age of 25 years and been 7 years a citizen of the United States, and who shall not, when elected, be an inhabitant of the state in which he is chosen. So, in order to be a representative, in order to represent your state, you have to be at least 25 years old. You have to be a citizen of the United States for at least 7 years, and you have to live in the state from which you are elected. Clause 3 of Section 2. Representatives and direct taxes shall be apportioned among the several states which may be included within this union, according to their respective numbers, which shall be determined by adding to the whole number of free persons, including those bound to service for a term of years, and excluding Indians not taxed, 3/5 of all other persons. The actual enumeration shall be made within 3 years after the first meeting of the Congress of the United States, and within every subsequent term of 10 years, in such manners as they shall by law direct. The number of representatives shall not exceed 1 for every 30,000. But each state shall have at least 1 representative, and until such enumeration shall be made, the state of New Hampshire shall be entitled to choose 3, Massachusetts 8, Rhode Island and Providence Plantations 1, Connecticut 5, New York 6, New Jersey 4, Pennsylvania 8, Delaware 1, Maryland 6, Virginia 10, North Carolina 5, South Carolina 5, and Georgia 3. So, in this clause, the founders are creating the system under which representatives, the number of representatives each state gets is determined. So, basically what this says is the representatives are apportioned to the states based on how many people live in those states, according to the representative numbers. So the number of people has to be determined within 3 years of the first meeting of Congress and every 10 years after that. So that's how you have to know how many people are living in the state within 3 years of the first meeting and 10 years after that. That's why we have a census every 10 years. That's part of what happens in the census. We count how many people live in a state, and that determines how many representatives that state gets at the federal level. Now, because at the time we hadn't really counted out how many people, we didn't really know how many people were living in the states because we hadn't actually done a census yet, they immediately just said, this is how many these states get. So that's what this list is here at the end. New Hampshire gets 3, Massachusetts gets 8, so on and so on. And it says here, the number of representatives shall not exceed 1 for every 30,000. So you get 1 representative for every 30,000 people. Now, you might think, wait a minute, hold on. That doesn't quite add up, because now in the House of Representatives, there's 435 representatives, but there's definitely way more. That's definitely way more than 1 for every 30,000 people. That's amended later in one of the amendments as Congress grew, as the nation grew. We had to make some adjustments on how many people. Now I think it's somewhere around. So eventually the amendment set the number of people, set the number of representatives at a hard cap, and it's just been adjusted based on population, how many people those members represent. So it's so we're definitely, our representatives definitely represent way more than 30,000 people now. I think it's probably closer to like 600,000 or so, but that is what it is. So now there's one sentence in this. There's one part of this clause that has caused a lot of controversy over the years, and that is this one here, where we decide how many people. So, according to the representative numbers, which shall be determined by adding to the whole number of free persons, including those bound to service for a term of years, so people who are indentured servants get counted, but excluding Indians who don't pay taxes, Native Americans who don't pay taxes, and 3/5 of all other persons. This is the notorious 3/5 compromise. So basically what this does is 3 for every 5 slaves held in a state, you get to count 3 of them toward your total population for determining how many representatives you get. Now, a lot of people think, oh, this is because the founders thought that the African American slaves were only worth 3/5 of a person. This is not true. This is false. The 3/5 compromise actually helped end slavery. Because think about it. The southern states that had a large slave population like Virginia, like North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia, these states had large slave populations. Populations who had no voice, who did not get to vote. They were property. They did not get a voice in government. But these southern states, they wanted their cake and eat it too. They wanted to hold all these slaves and count them towards the number of representatives they get, but they didn't want to actually give them freedom. And the founders saw that's a problem. So imagine these slaveholding states, Virginia, which were very populous, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, we're looking at 20 and Georgia, we're looking at 23 representatives just in that block of states alone. Now, if they had been allowed to count all of their slaves, they would have had more representation, an unequal amount of representation at the federal level. So they could have perpetuated slavery longer as the populations in the North grew. The populations in the South could have continued staying ahead as slave populations continued to grow. But the founders, in their wisdom, knew that allowing these slaveholding states to count their slaves towards their representation completely would give them more power and enable them to continue the institution of slavery longer than was good. I mean, all of it was bad, but it would have preserved slavery for even longer had the 3/5 compromise not been there. Now, some people might say, well, why compromise at all? Why go through this compromise? Why not stand on principle? Well, here's the issue. If without this compromise, the United States doesn't exist. The southern states say, forget you, we don't want to join this union. We'll continue doing our own thing. And then so the union falls apart and perhaps even falls back under British rule as a weakened and chaotic United States is reconquered by the foreign crown. So the 3/5 compromise helped found the Union and helped in the long run end slavery. I know a lot of people don't agree with it. A lot of people think that this is a barbaric and horrible opinion for the founders to feel that black people were only worth 3/5 of a person. That's not what this is said. This is only for the purposes of determining how many representatives a state gets. You only get to count, and you'll note here it says 3/5 of all other persons. Now it doesn't say blacks. It doesn't say specific racial group. It just says 3/5 of all persons, which if you're not free, you're probably a slave. And that means 3/5 of your slave population gets counted. So the 3/5 compromise, we should be glad for the 3/5 compromise because it helped end slavery in the long term. A blight on our nation and a disgusting, disgusting thing. People are not property. And I think that's very clear. So, next clause. 2 more clauses in Section 2, and then we'll be done. When vacancies happen in the representation of any state, the executive authority thereof shall issue writs of elections to fill the vacancies. So basically, this is saying that when a representative is perhaps dies in office or is made unable to fulfill his duties through injury or illness, then or leaves for some reason, then the executive authority of the state from which they're from, the state from which they are, the executive authority, the governor, can basically fill that seat. The governor of that state gets to fill the seat until the next election. That's basically what that means. And then last clause of Section 2, the House of Representatives shall choose their Speaker and other officers and shall have the sole power of impeachment. So impeachment is the removal of someone from office. So the House of Representatives is the body of Congress that gets to choose who gets impeached. So when Donald Trump was impeached, it was the House of Representatives that voted for impeachment. We'll learn later that the Senate, which is covered in Section 3, which we'll cover next time, the Senate is where the impeachment trial is held, but it is the House of Representatives that actually impeaches someone. So, that is all we're going to do for today. I hope you enjoyed this. Thanks for hanging out and listening to me ramble about the Constitution, the greatest law document in the history of mankind, in my opinion. So if you liked what you heard here, please smash that like button, leave a comment, and subscribe. But if you don't want to do that, share with your friends, help the channel out. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll look for you next time. Thanks, and goodbye.